Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral service of Mrs. Merilyn Schiffman. For those of you who are joining us online, the family welcomes you. For those of you who are here, please take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off. Officiating this afternoon is Rabbi Rachel Weiss and Cantor Howard Friedland from the Jewish Reconstructionist Congregation. At this time, the clergy is going to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya.
When we hear of a death, we say the phrase, Hamakom yinachem etchem, which in Hebrew means, may the source of all, or this place, comfort you in this time of brokenness. The Psalms say, Adonai karov lenishberei lev, that the source of all is close to those who are brokenhearted. And today, we come here because we are brokenhearted, because Merilyn has died. And we're here to gather in person and through the blessing of technology to be together, to acknowledge that brokenness and that tear that has occurred in the fabric of your family. The ribbon that you wear, the Kriya ribbon, is an outward sign of the tear that's happened inside. And like all symbols, we give it its meaning. And in this moment, it is whole. And as we come to begin Merilyn's funeral, we tear it with the words, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, blessed is the one who judges and rules rightfully and truthfully. May there be truth in the world, and acknowledge the reality of her passing. So I'm going to ask those of you who are wearing ribbons to stand as Cantor Howard and I come to tear the ribbon. As we gather to remember Merilyn Rosenfeld Schiffman, who lived her life fully, we remember the daughter of Celia and Albert Rosenfeld, the sister of Rhoda of blessed memory, the mother of David and Michael, and mother-in-law, but really also mother to Judy and Kathy, grandmother of Matthew and Joanna, Elizabeth and Zachary, and great-grandmother to Ellis, beloved aunt of Charles and Craig. We've come to tell her story today. And we begin with these words from the book of Ecclesiastes, which recognizes that everything that is alive has a beginning and an end, and in between is what we are blessed to call living.
דור הולך ודור בא, והארץ לעולם עומדת. בזרח השמש ובא השמש, ואל מקומו שואף. זורח הוא שם. הולך אל דרום, בסובב אל צפון, סובב, סובב הולך הרוח, בסביבתיו שב הרוח. כל הנחלים הולכים אל הים, והים איננו מלא אל מקום שהנחלים הולכים שם, הם שבים ללכת.
A generation is born and a generation goes. All streams return to the ocean, and yet the ocean is never full. Its waves, they come and they go. For everything in the world there is a time. For every desire there is an opportunity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to break and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep, a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them together. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to tear and a time to mend. The rituals that we do here today are to move us from a place of being in Merilyn's presence to a place of mourning that she is no longer here. We do this through making sure that the most important thing is that we and she are never alone. Even the word levaya for funeral that we do right now means accompaniment, because being together, not only to comfort each other, but also to remember and to begin to tell Merilyn's story, is what we all need. So too, we take care of Merilyn's body as we accompany it today to where she'll be buried. 94 and a half years is a very long time. In fact, today would have been her 94 and a half birthday. Just 2 days shy, although she had the blessing of dying on a day to remember in the numbers of 2/22/22. 94 and a half years is 34,493 days, give or take a few leap years. 34,000 days. We couldn't begin to tell the story of what happened in each one of them, but what we can do is capture her essence and the parts of Merilyn that we remember today, of a life full of love and family, of learning and of teaching, and of creating the community that is here, the community that is out where you are. And so today we begin to tell that story. We start now, but now today at this funeral service will only really just be a beginning, for you will all tell her story for as long as you are alive, and you will pass the story of Merilyn and the story of her stories down to generations that are to come. The 23rd Psalm reminds us of being together, of being in company, that when even we feel like we might be alone, even in death, that we are not. The Eternal is my shepherd, I shall never be in need. Amid the choicest grasses does God set me down. You lead me beside calm waters and restore my soul. You take me along the paths of righteousness in keeping with the honor of your name. Even should I wander in a valley of the darkest shadows, I will not be afraid, for you are with me. Your power and support are there to comfort me. You set in front of me a table in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me for all the days of my life, and I shall come to dwell inside the house of the Eternal forever. Goodness and kindness following Merilyn and coming from her 34,493 days of her life.
מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסור, בינות דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינח עליני. נפשי ישובב, יחנכני ומעג לצדק, ינחני ומעג לצדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא יירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני, לפני, שולחן נגד צוררי. דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני ראוי לא אחסר, אדוני ראוי לא אחסר.
Who better than to tell Merilyn's story than in the voices of her children and grandchildren? So I want to invite David, her son, to come and share with us your words and stories of your mom.
My mother had a full life and a very long life. She was born in 1927, which was truly a monumental year. That was the year that work began on Mount Rushmore. Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs. Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic Ocean. It was the year that the Model T ended its production, and it was the last year of the silent film era because it was the year of the first talkie. And it was the last year that a Republican was elected mayor of the city of Chicago. In 1927, Merilyn Schiffman was born to Celia and Albert Rosenfeld. They had both come to the United States as young children, and they both came from large families. My mother had 19 first cousins. But she was an only child until age 12 when her sister was born, Rhoda. I'm not quite sure how close they were as children, but I know that as adults they were very close. And it was back when my mother was in kindergarten that she met Edith, who was, they were best friends for life, and that was special. At Marshall High School, my mother worked on the school newspaper. And one day, in one of the issues, her name was spelled wrong. And she liked being a little different, so the new spelling stuck. So in case you wonder, that's how Merilyn with an A became Merilyn spelled with an E. She went to the University of Illinois. It was 1945. There was a shortage of housing on campus, and back then, most sororities did not accept Jews. So the parents of some of the Jewish co-eds bought a big house in Champaign, and that's where she lived. And a dozen years later, that's where her sister Rhoda lived when she went to the University of Illinois. In her senior year, she married my father, Merilyn Schiffman, who was an Army veteran, also a senior at the University of Illinois. And they followed the trajectory that was actually pretty common for Jewish newlyweds back then. An apartment in Rogers Park, the birth of a child, then a newly built house in Skokie, and she lived in that house for 48 years. To make ends meet, at one point she became a substitute teacher. And one day she got a call from Niles East High School. They needed somebody to teach psychology and sociology, and they called her, even though she didn't have the official background, the teaching courses that were normally required. But they offered her the job anyway. In time, she took the courses, she got her master's degree, and for many years she was a teacher of psychology and sociology, first at Niles East, then when it closed at Niles West. And teaching was a big part of her identity. She played bridge with teachers. She went to the theater with teachers. In retirement, she traveled abroad with teachers. But there was a limit. One day when she was asked to be the assistant coach of the girls' basketball team, she got out of it by saying, now, which sport is that? The one with the round ball or the one with the oval ball? But family was central to her life. Now, she grew up in a house with only daughters, and the next generation had only sons. I was the first, then my brother Michael, and then a dozen years on exactly the same schedule came her sister Rhoda had two sons, twins, Charles and Craig. It wasn't until Michael and I were in our 30s that we got married. I married Judy. Michael married Kathy, and at long, long last, my mother had daughters. It had been a long, long wait. Grandchildren came quickly. You're going to hear a lot of twos today. 2 boys, 2 girls, split between the 2 families. Matthew and Joanna, Elizabeth and Zach. And one of the blessings of a long life is she got to play with her great-grandson, Ellis, who is the first of what I fervently hope is a large generation. Get that? My mother died on 2/22/22. It was a date that we will always remember, a life that we will never forget.
It is a rare thing these days to have grandparents into your 30s, and a real blessing to be able to have that generation and those experiences. So on behalf of your generation, I want to invite Joanna to come and share your remembrances of your grandma.
So when we were kids, my brother and my cousins and I loved to go to our grandma's house on Greenleaf Street. And the thing I think we most looked forward to was spending time with her and with each other. But the second thing we looked forward to was the bottom drawer by her back door. And hidden in this drawer that was filled with odds and ends was what felt, at least to me, like an endless supply of fun-sized Snicker bars. And I always thought that they were there just for us, hidden in some random bottom drawer that was really only easily accessible to small children. And I'm pretty sure that was right, because years later, we found she had another hidden stash of Snickers in a higher cabinet that she was keeping just for herself. Even as she moved from her house to her condo and then to the Carrington, the placement of the drawer changed, but she always had a large supply of chocolate bars and was always very quick to offer them as soon as we arrived. When Matt graduated from college, my family traveled to Providence, and Grandma and I shared a hotel room. And one night, I stayed out later with Matt and his friends while the rest of the family went to sleep. And when I got back to our hotel room, I found a very familiar sight. Grandma fast asleep with the TV on absolute max volume and an open bag of chocolate bars spread out on the table. I tried to be quiet, but I guess at some point I woke her up and I heard her whisper, "Joanna, are you home? I got you some chocolate. Please eat as much as you want." And she was always very thoughtful and caring like that. But she was also headstrong and feisty and opinionated. She stood up for herself and did not back down when something upset her. And she did make some enemies along the way, mostly people who worked at the post office and at the Comcast call center. But she also forged an incredible path for herself and for her family. There were definitely times when I thought it would be easier if she was maybe a little bit more flexible or a little bit less opinionated. But I'm grateful that she was exactly the way she was, because I think Lizzie would agree, she taught us to be bold and strong and independent and curious, traits that I deeply value, but that were probably not encouraged in many women who were born in 1927. I'm incredibly grateful to have had her as a role model and a friend and a chocolate supplier, and most of all as my Grandma Merilyn.
Independent and feisty and forceful were all words that described. Lizzie is going to share as well some of your thoughts and your remembrances of your grandma.
As Joanna mentioned, Grandma Mare had an enormous impact and influence on my life. I think most people here share my understanding of her values and who she was as a person and the lessons that she taught all of us, but I just want to take a moment to enumerate a few of them. Some things that I've learned from my Grandma Mare: to know yourself well and to commit. When you find a pair of shoes that you like, buy 5 of them. That the most important thing in your wallet isn't money, it's a library card. That we should assert our place in the world and not let anything get in our way, even if it's a closed or a locked door. I'm sure you'll hear that story later. To prioritize self-care, taking care of ourselves. In her way, that meant never missing a hair appointment. To nurture plants and people, and plants that we think of as people. To never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, miss an opportunity to vote. To never stop learning, and to reframe challenges as teachable moments, and in a similar vein, not to accept any nonsense, especially from teenagers. To treasure family and to cherish and maintain friendships, preferably for 80 plus years if you can. To make your own rules. Coffee can absolutely be a bedtime drink and should preferably be strong and instant. To greet guests with warmth and a well-stocked candy drawer. That no occasion is too informal for lipstick. To embrace all moments in life, knowing that some will be sweet and some will be sour, and to savor them both, like in her meatballs. And to live boldly and confidently, and to trust your instincts, and to do your crossword puzzles in pen.
What a marvelous list and legacy. And it's a good thing she got into that door at Northwestern. It worked out well. There are many ways to have a Jewish identity, and family and rituals and traditions. Community is one of them. And music of its generation, the words to the song My Yiddish Mama that your niece Anna will share for us on the trumpet, reminds us of not only the era in which Merilyn was born, but also the strength and fortitude of women in her generation, and like so many of you here, that carry on and lead with strength and with grace. Alice, you know just what to do. The poet Chaim Nachman Bialik translated, "It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be and oh, to lose. A thing for fools, this holy thing, to love. For your life has lived in me. Your laugh once lifted me. Your word was a gift to me. And to remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing to love, a holy thing to love, what death has touched." We have brought into this room and into this moment the stories and the essence of who Merilyn was in so many different ways, through her family of origin, the family that she built, through her independence, through her career teaching and leading, through her love for all of you. And in this moment, we also mark not only the loss of her life, but a shift in your family and in the fabric of your world and community. As the matriarch of your generation, the last of your parents, is no longer here. And it is a stark reminder of what it means to get older and what it means to live in the world without someone ahead of you. She was so proud of her children and her grandchildren, and the love that you cared for her, whether it was small things like, David, you taking her to the Jewel every Saturday, or Michael, you buying flowers with her for her balcony so she could have some of that growth and beauty, even not in her home, but in her condo. And Judy and Kathy, whether it was sitting at the table or going shopping or having time with her as a friend. All of these are ways that you have learned as well how to be parents and how to take care and how to raise remarkable human beings of the next generation. And that is also what we mark today as we say goodbye to Merilyn. Part of those qualities that she embodied are qualities that now we would respect in anyone in the world, and in her time, as Lizzie and Joanna said, was not something that was so common for women to leave and to go to college away from home, to make a decision and get divorced, to live and raise children and have a career and create so much. Her memory will be a blessing. And so as we sit now with her memories and with these feelings of loss, we also pray and recognize that as she was lucky enough to live in her body alive for 94 and a half years, the essence of who any of us really are doesn't ever leave the world. It lives on, and it lives on in all of you, in all of us who are hearing her stories and who knew what it was to go to the back drawer and get a Snickers bar, or to call her or hear her voice, or learn something in her classroom, or be with her. That is what stays. The grammar changes to past tense. But the essence of who any of us is, our soul, is still here. Jewish tradition recognizes that when we're born, we take our first breath and we breathe that essence or that soul into our bodies. And it stays with us for as long as we are able to be alive. And it is unlike no other in the world. It makes us who we are. And when we exhale for the last time, that soul, it leaves our body. Soul and breath are the same word in Hebrew. And it goes and ascends, and we pray that it ascends on high, and at the same time that it goes very deep, and it lands inside our hearts that are broken with grief and with loss. So I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we chant El Malei Rachamim, the prayer for Merilyn's soul, that the essence of who she was becomes, like the wave that returns to the ocean, part of the fabric of the universe, and that we continue to hold part of it as we remember her.
El Malei Rachamim, שוכן במרומים, המצא מן נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מסירים את נשמת מרים שרחה לעולמו. אנא בר רחמים הסתירך בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, ותנוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen.
God, filled with compassion, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence, amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, illuminating like the brilliance of the skies, the soul of Merilyn Schiffman, who has gone to her eternal place of rest. May you, who are the source of compassion, shelter her beneath your wings eternally and bind her soul among the living, that she may rest in peace. And we say, Amen. We mourn the death of Merilyn, whose Hebrew name was Miriam. In the book of Numbers, chapter 20, it says, "And Miriam died, and the people, the community stayed, and they were without water." For Miriam was the one who gave life to our ancient ancestors as they were wandering on their way. And so they stopped, so they could take the time to bury their beloved leader who sustained and nurtured them. Today we stop as we prepare to take care of Merilyn's body, as we prepare to move to burial, knowing that her life sustained, gave life, and nurtured the generations that came after her.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at West Lawn Cemetery, located at 7801 West Montrose in Norridge. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker placed on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will have a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And also, please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. Memorial contributions in her memory to the American Cancer Society would be appreciated. The family will be observing a private Shiva period. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Mrs. Merilyn Schiffman along with her grandchildren from the chapel. And for those of you who are joining us online, the family appreciates your time. This concludes the service.